Welcome to One-on-One with B'nai B'rith International. I'm your host, CEO Dan Mariaschin. Thank you for spending some time with us today. I'm pleased today to have as my guest Isaac Herzog, chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel. And as chairman, Bougie leads the largest Jewish nonprofit organization in the world that played an indispensable role in the development of the state of Israel. And today is best known as the main link between Israel and Jewish communities everywhere, including promoting Aliyah to Israel. Prior to being unanimously elected as the Jewish Agency's chairman, Bougie was a member of Knesset from 2003 to 2018, serving as leader of the opposition from 2013 to 2017. He also held several ministerial posts, including Minister of Diaspora, Society, and Fight Against Antisemitism, and as Minister of Welfare and Social Services. In our conversation today, I'll be speaking with Bougie about JAFI's role in today's environment, how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting JAFI's work around the world, and how the organization is helping Jewish communities in crisis. We'll also talk about initiatives JAFI is undertaking to preserve Jewish continuity and the organization's plans to engage young Jews in diaspora communities. Bougie Herzog, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to appear in your podcast. I have huge respect for B'nai B'rith, and we work well together on many issues. And I want to wish all our viewers good health. That's the most important thing of all these days.
Indeed. Bougie, we just observed the 160th anniversary of the birth of Theodor Herzl, beginning of May. And it was only 25 years after Herzl's death that the Jewish Agency was established in 1929. How does that history, that Jewish history and that Zionist history, inform the work that you do?
Look, Theodor Herzl was a prophet whose prophecy was realized. When you think about it, he was a one of a kind after thousands of years. Actually, before the COVID-19 crisis, I visited the Herzl Museum in Mount Herzl, which depicts his library and his study. And it's fascinating to see how, just to feel where he worked. It was all brought in by the Zionist movement from Vienna. And Theodor Herzl then founded the World Zionist Organization and had the first Zionist Congress in 1897. And the Zionist Congress established the World Zionist Organization, and the World Zionist Organization, which was commissioned to realize the vision of Zionism, established the JNF, Keren Kayemet, to redeem the land in Eretz Israel, in Palestine those days, established Keren HaYesod 100 years ago to fund the acquisition of the land. And then in 1920, exactly 100 years ago, the Family of Nations in 1920, and then in 1922, the League of Nations adopted the Balfour Declaration of 1917, recognizing the need for a national home for the Jewish people, and decided to establish a Jewish agency, which will be founded by the World Zionist Organization. And that Jewish agency, which I lead today, started its operation in 1929 and was commissioned to bring about the creation of the Jewish state, which it did. David Ben-Gurion was our first chairman and led us to the creation of the state. Thereafter, we were commissioned to bring Olim to Israel, new immigrants. We brought in 4 million so far, 35,000 only this year, even during the Corona crisis. We'll talk about it. And in the last generation, we are the center pillar of dealing with the connection between Israel and world Jewry, and world Jewry in and of itself and to Israel.
So here we are now, 72 years on from 1948. What do you see as the role of the Jewish Agency in today's environment, and how has JAFI adapted to that reality?
First of all, we realize that there are many challenges ahead in front of our nation before the COVID-19, which is, of course, I've always mentioned it, how do we preserve our nation united? I foresaw a process of a rift, which was extremely disturbing between what I call Jerusalem and Babylon, 6.5 million Jews in Israel and 6.5 million Jews in the United States. So I said Israel is Jerusalem and Babylon is the United States. In ancient times, they produced two Talmuds, and I think they must be together, but they grow somewhat separate because of a lot of reasons. That was the heat of the discussion pre-COVID. Thereafter, of course, we discussed anti-Semitism, which was there before COVID and clearly is now, and we expect it, unfortunately, post-COVID. And the issue of, communities all over the world knocking on our doors, say we want to be Jewish, and then how we keep the centrality of Israel in all of this and Jewish continuity. During the Corona crisis, clearly something else happened, and that is, first and foremost, the collapse of many Jewish communities, the paralysis of Jewish communal life. Jewish life, Judaism, is something that is carried from generation to generation by a minyan, by the convening of human beings. And when you have a virus that requires social distancing, it kills communal life. And this is a huge, huge challenge, which of course we've dealt with. We were the first and most involved global Jewish organization in doing this, because we realize we have a leadership role. So we are there for many, many communities and many, many challenges.
So before coronavirus already, you were looking at the possibilities of assisting Jewish communities in crisis. You refer to yourselves in your mission statement as the Jewish world's first responder. Tell us about that.
Throughout the ages, were first responders, either by bringing Jews immediately to Israel, by helping communities on behalf of the state of Israel. Take, for example, the famous hurricane in Houston at the time, or the floods, sorry. And of course, in other major challenges, Ethiopian community now in Ethiopia, and other challenges that emerge all the time. In this respect now, the first thing we've done, of course, was pick up the phone and call Italy. 22 Jewish communities in Italy, 20,000 Jews. Historical communities like Genoa and Venice and Livorno and many others. And I can only quote the president of Rome, the community in Rome, telling me that they have, in the last century, never, apart from the Holocaust, they've never faced such a horrific challenge. They were totally paralyzed, so much so that together with Keren Hayesod, we supplied them both with financial aid, but even, hygiene products and hotline. And that taught us that there are many communities on the way. Spain, South Africa, Latin America, and many other communities. And now we have in FSU and many other places. And therefore, we've dealt with two arms here. One, we always had a historic arm within Israeli society. And we realized that the Israeli voluntary sector, nonprofit sector, is in shambles. So we established a special loan fund for NGOs in Israel. Let me remind you that the Jewish world was the one who built the Israeli nonprofit sector throughout the ages. And we've done it with a social bank called Ogen. And we also built a special loan fund for communities around the world to help them in their needs. And the reaction is overwhelming, the amount of requirements and requests that we've received from all over the world, because it is clear to us communities have suffered enormous death. It takes France, for example, in proportionate numbers. Israel is 8 million people. Unfortunately, with a lot of pain, about 270 people died. French Jewish community is 400,000, 5% of that, but they have around 2,000 people who passed away. So you have that in many communities. You have that in Britain. You have that in, of course, in Italy. You have that in Latin America and so forth. And we are there with our emissaries on the ground, thousands of emissaries who became the social workers and the backbone of many Jewish communities. We supplied for Pesach, we supplied matzos and wine to many communities. Some of them could not get anything through the curfew or the quarantine, but we managed to get it to them. And in the silver lining, of course, two things. We have Aliyah, I mentioned before. We have the biggest social housing company in the country with the biggest old age community in old age homes. And unfortunately, no one suffered from the corona because of a very good professional work that was done by that team.
I was touched by the photographs of the Olim who arrived in Israel during this crisis. I don't want to make an exact analogy, but I was in Israel during the first Gulf War and actually flew into Israel at that time at Ben Gurion. They were arriving from Russia at that time and also from Ethiopia at that time during that crisis. Tell me about Aliyah and why there's still, even during a crisis like this, people are saying, I'm coming anyway. Tell us about that.
This is something unique
that people feel.
I think this is something metaphysical. I really truly believe this is something that's unique to our nation. The homecoming and the ingathering of the exiles is something really great. It's a unique purpose. Tomorrow morning we will have a flight from FSU, special flight. This week we had a special flight from Argentina. And hopefully soon we'll have another special flight from Ethiopia. During the COVID, we had 15 from Aliyah from 15 countries. It's not easy because we've changed the rules. Now, you know, usually you must have a personal interview with the candidates for Aliyah. This time we will have it by Zoom and with special requirements of producing special documents. And we do foresee a major wave of Aliyah from all over the world following the crisis.
What kinds of initiatives and programs are you engaged in now and going forward to bring more young people into active roles in their communities, but active roles with a connection to Israel?
Well, we feel that it's essential to build the future leadership of the Jewish people. So if you look, all our programs in connecting Jews to each other, I mean, our pillars of activities are Aliyah, and the main pillar is connecting Jews to each other and to the state of Israel. And the last pillar is, of course, impacting Israeli society and, of course, delivering the message of world Jewry in Israel. So in the pillar of connectivity, I mean, we have a vast array of projects. Some of them have to do with flying to Israel. And these are the immersive programs, the immersive experiences such as Masa and Taglit Birthright and Onward and others. They've all been impacted by the situation, and we are still monitoring the situation because we would like to have them return back, but it will take time and they will have a huge impact because of travel. So we are analyzing it. We have the partnerships. We have dozens of partnerships between Israeli communities and the communities abroad, and it works beautifully. In this crisis, brothers and sisters convened over the ocean on Zoom, and I participated in so many meetings on Zoom of communities, and it was really moving and exciting, from Kabbalat Shabbat to Passover learning, and now we will have Shavuot learning and things like that. So the whole issue of connecting through experiences will also go through a change. You as me know that the summer camps programs are going to be dramatically affected. We have 1,500 counselors selected by the Jewish Agency ready to go. We realize it's not going to be that way. And therefore, they will have to produce alternative platforms. And this is very, very important.
B'nai B'rith partnered with JAFI on bringing young diaspora Jews, young Greeks, young Cypriots together for a mission to Israel in support of the relationships amongst Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. Tell us the importance of that kind of project. It's exciting. This was an opportunity not only for all to have a chance to see Israel, but also to be supportive of a very important geopolitical development going on at the same time.
So it is one of my favorite projects, and I want to thank you, Dan, and especially your chairman, Kaufman. I mean, it's a pleasure to work with you guys on this project with our team headed by Yigal Palmore, the head of our Foreign Relations Department. This project was initiated during my predecessor, Natan Sharansky, and it shows how the issue of diasporas of nations is a common denominator between nations. You have no idea how impacting it is, because when I speak to governments and when I speak to communities, they're all intrigued. There are many governments who are talking to us, but none of them have yet made it concrete as Greece and Cyprus. But we're talking to governments in the Balkans, governments in Europe, and governments in Asia, and it's really fascinating because what they are intrigued mostly about is the story of the Jewish agency as a structure. Usually what you have is you have the government of the nation state versus diaspora communities. What we have in Israel through the creation of the World Zionist institutions is a hybrid situation whereby the Jewish agency is actually controlled by world Jewry. We are representing world Jewry vis-a-vis Israeli body politic by covenant and law. And this gives us a special advantage, value added, the ability to maneuver worldwide within the communities, not as a government agency of Israel, but rather as a representative of the Jewish people.
You served as Minister for Diaspora Affairs with a focus among the foci that you had on anti-Semitism. There's been a tremendous spike over the last several years. How do you see it, and how can the Jewish Agency participate in the battle against anti-Semitism?
We are participating heavily with all other relevant organizations which are doing great work all over, each one with their specialty and expertise and focus. It is a huge challenge. It is clear to us, clear like nothing else, that we will see a rise in anti-Semitism. We're already seeing it on the web under the lockdown, but it will unfortunately may be transformed into activity following the lockdown that requires tightened security and preparation, working with government officials and agencies, and of course with the Israeli government as well. And through our Security Assistance Fund, we urge communities to work with us on helping them with whatever they need in equipment in order to protect themselves, because it was proven that it saves life. So yes, we have a lot to work on and make sure that, you know, the famous old plague of ancient times recurring unfortunately to modern times of hating Jews will not bear fruit.
So one final question, I'm going to ask you to be a prognosticator. Looking ahead 25 years, I mean, you are the third generation of one of the first families of the Zionist movement and the state of Israel. So you have you can look in the rearview mirror and you can also look ahead. I'm asking you to look ahead. So 25 years from now, how do you see the Jewish Agency and how do you see the state of Israel?
Look, I'm an optimist by my being. I truly believe in what my father wrote in his memoirs, Netzach Israel, the eternity of Israel, and the duty to work for the eternity of Israel. This is what fills my being. I enjoy serving my people and my country. I think it's the most noble cause of all. the story of this nation strikes me dramatically. I can read about, the history of the past in so many places. And I always say, I mean, it's amazing, amazing history. I'll tell you, I read recently a biography of Rabbi Menashe ben Israel, a biography in English by an American professor. Now, Menashe ben Israel was a rabbi in Amsterdam in the 17th century, and he was actually the first one to reopen the gates for Jews in Britain. But apart from that, he depicts a story where he meets one of his childhood friends who converted to Christianity. His name was Aaron Levy, who converted to some Latin name, and he traveled to South Latin America, where Ecuador is, and he told him that he met an Indian chief and who took him into the heartland of the forest of the Amazonas, and in the heartland comes in few people who look like Europeans, and he talks to them and he tells them, and they tell him, we are the sons of God, we come from the tribe of Reuben as part of the expulsion of Jews from Second Temple. Now, all I'm saying is this really, these stories emerging all the time. What's the difference between that and what's happening now with hundreds of thousands of Latin American people davening in communities and congregations in the heart of the Amazonas saying we are Jewish? The only difference is, real difference, of course, is that we have the state of Israel. It was the same question of who's a Jew, who's part of our community, how do we strive to keep our being Jewish, what does it mean being Jewish? These are all great questions that strike us when we want to serve our nation, except we now have our nation state and we should be proud of it. But this nation state has a duty towards all Jews around the globe.
Well, on that note, we wish you well, Bougie, in all that you do and all that the Jewish Agency does for Israel and the Jewish people. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Pleasure, and good luck to all of you. Good health, and see you both in Israel and in your communities.
Well, special thanks to Bougie Herzog for joining me today, and thank you for tuning in to One-on-One with B'nai B'rith International. If you like what you hear, make sure you never miss a program by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel, and be sure to visit our website, bnaibrith.org, to learn about our work. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. For my guest, Isaac Bougie Herzog, I'm your host, Dan Mariaschin. We'll talk to you next time on One-on-One with B'nai B'rith International.